trying to protect the youngsters. And today, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, was heckled in the streets as he laid flowers at the scene in Southport.
Time to change, Starmer.
Come on, needed. How many more children? Is it mine next? Got your photos, off you go. Make a real change, Prime Minister. Make a real change! Get children! Go away!
I just found out my friend's 9-year-old daughter was killed.
You're not wanted!
You could hear angry locals saying, "Is that it?" in regard to the Prime Minister briefly laying flowers at the scene. And tensions have continued to rise throughout the day. In the last hour, a large crowd has gathered outside a mosque, chanting and throwing stones and bottles at riot police. Officers stood guard outside the building amid chants of "No surrender" and "English till I die" from sections of the crowd. Some police officers have reportedly suffered what appear to be minor injuries in chaotic scenes outside the mosque. A riot van was also set on fire. A police helicopter is also said to be hovering over the area. Well, we can cross live to Southport now, and GB News' reporter Sophie Reaper. Sophie, can you tell me about the atmosphere that's playing out at the moment in Southport?
Absolutely. The atmosphere is incredibly tense here. We've had to retreat to a safe distance after things simply became too dangerous for us. Now, we've been here all day in Southport today where things have remained relatively calm. But of course, in the last hour or so alone, we were preparing to leave Southport for the day when I became aware of this riot taking place, and we had to come back in order to report on exactly what was going on. And I just want to bring in now my colleague and reporter Will Hollis. Myself and Will have been here in Southport all day reporting on this story. Will, I know both of us have seen this riot taking place from very close up. Just tell our viewers what it is that you saw.
Yes, well, Sophie, what we've seen over the last 2 days is an outpouring of grief. This is the other side of it. This is an outpouring of anger. We're not far from Hart Street, which is where the tragic stabbing of 3 girls that were killed, as well as others who are still in a critical condition, took place. But we know that there are a number of protests as well as vigils taking place right now in Southport. And this was just a stone's throw away from that attack at St. Luke's Road. When we arrived, there were people lining the streets, lots of them with their phones in hand. And when we got further down to where it was essentially a riot, there were multiple large police vans. One of them was set on fire by groups of what I'd say is probably hundreds of mainly young men, many of them wearing masks, some older men as well. There were journalists down there similar to us, and people were trying to take their phones and their cameras to stop them from filming what was happening. We saw people throwing bricks at police vans, and as well as dog units, there were obviously police dressed in riot gear and headgear with riot shields, and some of those police were covered in blood. We've just had a statement from Merseyside Police. This is the Assistant Chief Constable Alex Goss, who says it is sickening to see this happening within a community that has been devastated by the tragic loss of 3 lives. Now, what the police say is that at around 7:45, a large group of people believed to be supporters, and they're very clear in this, believed to be supporters of the English Defence League, began to throw items towards a mosque on St. Luke's Road. That's just where we were, where that riot is taking place, Sophie.
We also, of course, heard some of the members of the crowd shouting things which I would describe as perhaps racially motivated. Would you like to perhaps explain to our viewers what it is that we heard the crowd shouting?
Yes, well, it seems like a lot of this is motivated by racism, particularly anti-Islamic racism. From where we were, this riot was taking place right outside of a mosque, and an association that works with the mosque says that they were hearing phrases like "we're English till I die," "we're English till I die." This really is now at boiling point in a community that has faced tragedy over the last few days. It was only an hour or two ago that we were in the town hall where there was thousands of people laying flowers. Now we have certainly hundreds of people throwing bricks and bottles, breaking up walls because of their anger. But the police as well have said that they think that some of the people that are here rioting in Southport tonight are from different areas, not from here. But we also know that some of the local people that we've seen on the streets in the last couple of days are very angry and upset about what has happened. And there's been lots of speculation about who did this, the killing of the 3 girls and the attack on the local summer club. And the police are saying don't speculate because they are still finding out all of the answers, and what we're seeing here is that anger displaying on the streets of a seaside town that is here grieving. There are two sides to this.
I just want to really emphasise here something that Merseyside police have said today, and that is, as Will said, not to speculate. In a statement earlier, they said that there has been rumours online about who the suspect is. They've told us that that identity is incorrect, and they've asked people not to speculate and to post on social media. This is something that has been re-emphasised by Downing Street because this is something that can often derail and disrupt police investigations. So all of this potential racial the racial issues that are behind this, police are asking people to not go along with this because simply they're saying we do not know, or they have not released yet who that suspect is. They're saying that that he remains in police custody for questioning, but it's so crucial that we do not speculate at this point about who that person is. Now, you can see here behind me, I think, or you can certainly hear a police helicopter that is still flying over the scene. You probably can't see, but there is still the remnants of some smoke in the air from when the police riot van was set fire to. Now, whilst we were close to the front of the fray when police took out their riot gear, that police van, there was a small explosion as that fire continued to burn. You could see all over the floor the rubble that people had been throwing. So quite terrifying scenes, Will. I think if you live in this local area, now Southport is a seaside town. This is a residential area. This is a town that people come to. Just to our left is the promenade where there's ice cream shops, there's candy floss being sold, there's fish and chips, there's families enjoying their summer holiday, and yet less than a mile to my right, to your left, there's a riot taking place. How terrifying.
Well, I was remarking to the people that we're with how pretty of a place Southport is. It's a beautiful place, and it makes sense why so many people would choose to holiday here. That's a stone's throw away from where people are throwing stones. As we were walking away from the violence and the disorder that we were seeing on the street, we saw people coming out of their homes telling the people that were going towards the violence and the disorder on the street not to come here, to turn around. They were swearing at them, telling them to go away, essentially, in much more curt words than that. And people here don't want this in their community. A lot of the people that were lining the streets were upset about what was happening. But we know on the other side, there is undoubtedly people from this community that were upset, that are angry, but Merseyside police say that many people who they think were involved in what we're describing as a riot here in Southport were not from the local area, that they've come from maybe neighbouring places because they've seen what's happened, particularly on social media, speculation. The world that we live in now, everything is a lot more instant and people can make their minds up about things very quickly, which is why, particularly for journalists, we have to be so certain with what we're saying. Is the fact that helicopter is going back over again. We can remark on the fact that only a couple of days the helicopters going over Southport were helicopters for the hospitals, for the ambulance services, taking young children who had been attacked to hospital here in Merseyside, but also in Manchester. That police helicopter is here for a very different reason, and they're probably trying to track the riot and the disorder which we saw drifting off into the distance.
Will, thank you so much for joining us. Truly terrifying scenes here in Southport. We have both been here today, and it seems a real change in atmosphere from heartbreak and from condolences to now anger and asking exactly what and why this has happened in this small seaside town.
My thanks to Sophie Reaper and Will Hollis. We're going to stay on this story. We've torn up the running order tonight. This is a massively important story. It follows a tragedy yesterday. 3 young girls killed in cold blood at a dance class. We're going to be speaking to a top cop about what has happened and about the reaction next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The sunny spell that many have experienced this week makes this the perfect time to seek inspiration for fresh, beautiful food to fit the weather. Hannah Harley-Young from Crazy Sexy Food joins me once again for the latest in our Taste of Britain series. And to go alongside the return of the glorious sunshine, she recommends tequila.
To be honest with you, it's more about my total love of tequila. It is my favourite drink. I have my favourite cocktail ready to be shaked for you in a second, which is obviously the margarita. But I think also I just love this sort of general story of tequila. Tequila, a bit like with champagne, can only be produced in the region of Tequila in Mexico. But I've actually brought for you, interestingly, a brand that is London-based. This was set up by Tom and Jack. They were drinking, I think, in sort of 2018, 2019, somewhere in South London, and realised that tequila could actually be quite enjoyable.
Do you know what it's made of?
It is. It's made from the blue agave plant. Now, 300 million of these plants are harvested every year. It takes between 8 to 12 years to harvest. Their tequila is made to be drank with tonic, which is not your usual accompaniment with tequila. Usually it's lime, it's a margarita. With a Blanco tequila, the idea is that the process is that once it's distilled, that is the end, it's bottled and it's sold. This is the Reposado. I haven't actually opened that, but if you do want to have a smell, you can open it. But the idea behind this is that it's been rested, so it's rested in oak barrels. I actually love people's behaviour behind tequila now. I think back in the day it had a little slightly bad rep that you'd drink cheap shots and maybe make some bad mistakes on a night out, whereas now we're actually starting to appreciate it and respect it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. Now, there is growing anger in Southport, violence and actually broad disorder and chaos as the police are dealing with violent scenes. People are angrily responding, of course, to the murder in cold blood of 3 young children at a dance class in Southport yesterday. Of course, we know nothing of this suspected suspect and their origins or their nationality, but this is a major police incident now. Let's get reaction from former Detective Chief Superintendent Kevin Hurley. Kevin, first of all, what do you make of the scenes playing out this evening in Southport, the anger and the violence?
Well, I mean, it's really unfortunate because the people who are now starting getting stoned and bricked and having their police vehicles set on fire are the very people who, were unarmed, took on a person who'd stabbed and killed those 3 kids. So what's the shame about this is that the senior police leadership and local politicians have both failed to manage the narrative of public anger in that area. Of course, trying to step away from saying anything that could in any way cause people to say they've criticised any particular group.
Yeah.
And then secondly, what we're looking at now is there's still no senior leadership, and I'm talking at sort of superintendent level, out on the ground trying to look at that, because there's not much bricking going on, actually. I can see an opportunity for a superintendent level person, if he or she were to pick up a loud hailer and start to talk with the crowd and actually say, we share your angst with this, we're the ones who actually came to the rescue, let's not make this situation worse. Using those kind of phrases, you may be able to talk this situation down. I've done it personally myself in much worse situations like that. If you get out there and talk to them, a lone person in front of the shields and with a loud hailer, being reasonable and trying to seek empathy, you may even stop this getting worse. I don't think this will get particularly worse now, because the population of Southport are, broadly speaking, reasonably well advantaged in society relative to other areas, and it's relatively homogeneous. And if you look at these people, there's not that many, to use the vernacular, really kicking off. I blame this partly on the senior police leadership not managing the narrative, as well as the politicians. People up there are not stupid. They will have been told what the attacker looks like from people who were there at the scene. So if that person is a person from an ethnic minority, police need to give that ground. If that person is, shall we say, from a religion that is associated with acts of great violence, then they need to be honest about that. And that's likely to stop people feeling like you're trying to manage their angst and their emotions. I don't think they would be kicking off if they had a bit more information. I think the police, senior leadership and senior politicians need to make some decisions about sharing a bit more. Of course, they can't say the name of the guy because of his alleged age, but they can probably give up a bit more than say he's from Wales.
Now, this incident yesterday, this violent assault, this awful triple murder, is not considered by the police to be a terror-related act. The violence is never justified, is it, Kevin Hurley? But is the public anger justified?
Well, I mean, first off, I'm not sure that they're saying it's not considered to be a terrorist-related act. I think they were being slightly, how can I put it, circumspect. How they said that we don't suspect this is terrorist, when of course what we do know is that they were offered the assistance of the Northwest Regional Counter-Terrorist Police Unit.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have happened if there was, how can I put it, wasn't a little bit of smoke there. And I think they needed to manage that narrative better, and I still think they need to. I also understand why a lot of these people are angry. To be honest, I have a sense of anger about what's happened, and it's not even my town. But what concerns me is, again, senior police leadership are not managing this in terms of the narrative, and they're not managing what's going on right now, that essentially ordinary police officers, because these ones you're seeing here are not full-time public order officers, or they may have arrived now, some of them in black, you'll see them in black suits. Most of them are just normal cops, where they've brought along their emergency vans. You can even see some of them handing out helmets and shields. Most of them haven't got the stuff, and fortunately it's calm. And I think most people realise it's not the police's fault, but I think senior police leadership should be out on the ground right now with a loud hailer, talking to people.
But Kevin, when you talk about managing the narrative, does that involve the cops saying, look, this person, this suspect, is not from an ethnic minority or is not of a certain religion? Is this sort of managing the narrative about giving the public more information about the person that allegedly did this?
Yes, it's exactly the point. They should be clear about his background, because everyone is guessing here, and I'm guessing. Everyone's guessing what they think has happened.
Are the public being treated like children, Kevin Hurley? To
some extent, yes. To some extent, yes. I think they're trying to manage the public. They're trying to manage what they know. And a lot of those people there will have seen the attacker. Let's be clear. People have already described him, and they will know if he's said certain words or hasn't said certain words. And police should be clear about that, because it's not going to make this any better.
Do you suspect, Kevin, do you suspect that, of course, we wholeheartedly condemn these appalling scenes of violence. It's deeply troubling, it's wrong and it's counterproductive. But in terms of the police's management of this trouble that's playing out, is political correctness at play, do you think?
No, I think what it is, the police there aren't the properly equipped, trained, riot, public order type police. You can see they've got no helmets, no visors. There's probably been a decision made at some stage by someone in the chain saying, don't go out in helmets and, fine, risk the police officers' eyesight, their teeth, their cheekbones, and so on. That's what they're thinking. Completely unacceptable. What we need, look at this.
You'll see footage there of a police officer, Kevin, getting into his van with what looks like a serious gash on his head. There he is.
Correct.
He's got a dressing on his head. He's received a wound to his head. This is pretty serious violence, isn't it?
Well, I'm saying it's moving that way, but I hope it won't go that way. What I'm saying is, let's get a senior officer, clearly one, with some presence, a bit of empathy and a bit of bottle, to go out there and start to talk to the crowd on his own and push the officers back and initially talk with a loud hailer and try and deal with some of that sense of angst, because it may work, because I know it does, because I've done it in worse situations.
Kevin Hurley, just to reiterate our condemnation of this violence, but let me ask you, where does this anger come from? I mean, clearly on a human level, there is fury about what happened to those 3 little girls. We share in that anger, others injured. But what is playing out in the minds of those people who are now essentially, playing out violence and attacking police officers and causing disruption?
Well, I think they feel they're getting a lack of information, and they are putting 2 and 2 together and maybe getting 4, or maybe they're not, because the perception out there amongst much of the public, and I'm watching it, is that they think that this is a person potentially of Somali or East African heritage. They think they're a person of Muslim background, and so that needs to be managed. And if they are indeed both of those, then they need to have a better narrative and say, we regard this one as a loner, a very sad case. There's an issue going on here. Yes, we are working with the Muslim community. We are working with the Prevent program to try and stop this kind of thing going on. But it is what it is.
Indeed. We've seen, haven't we, violent scenes at Manchester Airport. We've also seen violent riots in Leeds, of course, following an attempt to rehome certain children within one particular family address. Those riots saw a bus set on fire and a police car overturned. Is Britain in the grip of lawlessness at the moment, Kevin?
Well, let me just finish that. And we've seen an army officer stabbed repeatedly in the back by someone as well in the last couple of days. So I think what we've got happening here is a narrative is developing amongst lots of people about there is a problem, we are under threat from the religion which you're not allowed to talk about unless you are accused of Islamophobia. Now, there is a problem that people who follow that religion, lots of them do carry out, not lots, but a good number have carried out terrorist offences within the UK. People are not fools. If this is what's happened again, then that needs to be accepted and the narrative needs to be managed.
And of course, we can't speculate, Kevin. This is at the moment we don't know about the suspect. We don't have details. But go on.
But no, we can't. But if that is not the case, then police need to come out full on and say this person is not is not a Muslim.
Yeah.
They need to say, they need to come out and say that, because otherwise people are going to speculate. And I'm not saying it's wrong or right, but what I'm saying is people have seen a narrative twisted by a Pakistani heritage lawyer where police officers were battered at an airport where people in the northwest will go on their holidays, so that was close to home. they've seen an army officer stabbed in the back, and at the same time they've seen a leading Muslim Islamist extremist jailed for life the other day, as well as we've also seen people of apparently Pakistani heritage chasing the police away in Leeds and setting fire to a bus. So yeah, I'm just telling you how people see it out there. I'm not saying I necessarily see it that way or not. Therefore, the police need to be sensitive not only to the needs of certain ethnic minority groups, but to the needs of all of the British public.
Well, indeed, and we've seen violence. We've
Sikhs,
seen
Sikhs, Hindus, Buddhists. They're all concerned at what they see.
Most definitely. Kevin Hurley, thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch up soon. Retired police officer Kevin Hurley, a top detective there, sharing his views. Well, more on these violent scenes playing out in Southport in just a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. The high temperatures, the high humidity will continue across the southern parts through the next few days, and that brings the risk of some thunderstorms. High pressure is generally in control, leading to a lot of fine and settled weather, but there is a weak front across northern parts of Scotland, and here it is a bit fresher than elsewhere. But as we go through the night, do watch out for some hefty showers pushing into southern parts of England. Some of these could have the odd bit of thunder mixed in as well, and there may be a few pockets of mist and fog, but across southern parts it's really going to be a warm and sticky night. Temperatures really holding up. A much fresher story further north. In fact, in some of the rural spots, the sheltered glens of Scotland, we could fall as low as 4 or 5 Celsius. So a bit of a fresher, chilly start across Scotland first thing, and that front I mentioned earlier bringing some outbreaks of rain to the Northern Isles. Otherwise, it's a dry, bright and sunny story for many. A bit more cloud perhaps across parts of Northern Ireland and some parts of Northern England. A bit of a grey start here, but elsewhere across much of England and Wales, any mist and fog patches that do develop overnight will quickly be burnt away by the sun, and there will be plenty of sunshine and plenty of blue skies. That being said, we are expecting a few more showers to develop as we go into the afternoon, particularly across southern southeastern parts, and these showers could be fairly intense. Some heavy downpours, some frequent lightning, some thunder and hail all could lead to some issues. The temperatures are still going to be on the high side, just about getting into the low 30s across the south. Fresher than this, though, further north, similar to today. High teens, low 20s, so feeling warm enough in any sunshine. Into Thursday, and the heavy thunderstorms are going to be a bit more widespread. Across much of England and Wales, there is the risk of some thundery downpours. Meanwhile, across Scotland and Northern Ireland, a few showers are possible, and it is going to be a little bit cloudy at times. Friday's looking like it will be a bit drier for many before something fresher and wetter by the weekend. Bye-bye.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. Angry clashes and violence in Southport following the tragic murder of 3 young girls at a dance class yesterday. A police van has been set alight with bottles and wheelie bins thrown at officers. We've seen footage of one particular male police officer getting into a van with what looked like a serious gash to his head. A bit of a head injury suffered there by that officer, as you can see if you're watching our television output. Officers say items were thrown towards a local mosque in scenes that they say are sickening to see within a community that has been devastated by the tragic loss of 3 young lives. That's a statement from the local constabulary. Earlier, hundreds gathered for a vigil to remember the 3 killed and 7 injured at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class on Monday. We've got the names now of the 3 little girls, Bebe, Elsie and Alice, who were 6, 7 and 9 respectively. Alice, who passed away earlier today. All killed in the attack, 5 children and 2 adults still in a critical condition. A 17-year-old male has been arrested on suspicion of murder. That person remains in custody. We don't know about their ethnicity, their religion, their culture, which is why it's inappropriate to speculate at this point. But angry scenes in Southport. Let's get reaction from my top pundits this evening. We have columnist and broadcaster Esther Kraku, former special advisor to Margaret Thatcher, broadcaster and writer Niall Gardner, and presenter and author Amy Nicole Turner. It's difficult for us to talk about this story without more information, Esther. A lot of anger in Southport. The violence is not justified. It's the anger.
It is, but of course, it's justified because the murder of innocent children is always going to cause anger, of course. But I think there's something more insidious happening here. There are many communities in this country that have almost been primed to think the worst of other communities, and I think that's deeply unhelpful. Like you said, we don't know anything about the person in custody who is alleged to have committed these crimes. We don't know his race, his religion. We don't know anything. It's just a 17-year-old person, and we know this person is under the age of 18, so legally there will probably be some restrictions about advertising or just even revealing his name or whatever. I personally don't agree with the decision to not name this person or give us the public any details, because I think that's actually something that's fueling the misinformation and the anger, because people that are primed to think the worst of you know, in this case it looks like Muslims because they're attacking a mosque, or you know, people from of a foreign background, it just fuels conspiracies that give them the kind of energy to do this, and I think that's quite unhelpful. I think if the police put in as much energy protecting the public as they do trying to manage the public's feelings by trying to withhold this information, effectively coddle the public, we'd be in a much better place. I don't think this is the typical knife crime that you see. Obviously, a knife crime that you see in many cities around the UK are usually inner city gang-based violence amongst young people. This is a lone single person that the police are not treating as a terrorist attack that went to attack children, young girls. I mean, you could arguably say this is more about violence against women and girls than actual knife crime, although obviously a knife was used in this incident.
Indeed. Niall, the reaction to the tragic triple murder that happened yesterday demonstrates and illustrates major tensions in this country between various ethnic groups.
Well, firstly, of course, this was an act of savagery and barbarism, sheer evil. And naturally, there's a great deal of anger over this. But of course, violence against the police, destruction of property, completely unacceptable. I think at the same time, there needs to be transparency and accountability from authorities here, starting at the very top with the Prime Minister. This is a major incident here, and so far there has been a complete lack of detailed information coming from the authorities, and hence you're seeing this kind of anger on the streets of Southport. And there should be full transparency with regard to who carried this out, the background. All of this needs to be fully, I think, divulged to the public. And there should be some kind of official commission of inquiry, actually, what happened, what allowed this to happen, because this is a horrific act of tremendous evil here in the United Kingdom. It must never be allowed to happen again. And we do need to see a better response from the government, from the authorities, and full transparency and accountability with regard to what happened.
Indeed, this is Sir Keir Starmer's first major political headache, this incident, isn't it, Amy?
I think you have to remember that we're talking about a 17-year-old. So within the law, the police cannot disclose the identity of the 17-year-old. Yes, they can put in a request to the court, and maybe we will find out in a few days' time. But I think that community that we've seen tonight, they're hurting, and they're hurting for good reason. They've been left traumatised by this yeah, Niall's completely right. It's absolute barbarism. You can't think of anything worse. It's unimaginable. But they're searching for an explanation, and they think they found one because of all the nonsense that's been spam online. There's been accounts made of news channels that don't exist, which has been spinning names that translate to something that means nothing.
Yeah.
And the truth is that there isn't going to be an explanation, because whoever this person is, whatever you find out about this person, they don't represent any community. They represent just themselves and just their actions, which are obviously unimaginably unacceptable. So I don't know what you think you're going to get by knowing any more about this person's identity. What could we possibly change in our reaction? Are we going to then direct anger at that particular community?
Well, perhaps accountability at that particular community.
So people would be... So this person would be on behalf of a community, just by being who they are.
If it followed a pattern of Islamic violence, for example, then that's something that would have to be addressed.
So it would be appropriate for the 3 million Muslims in the UK to take the brunt for one person's actions, who is a 17-year-old boy.
Well, of course, that's unacceptable. That's just one possible example. I mean, I think for many people, we all remember the Abdul Yazidi case, right? This man was clearly unvetted, shouldn't have been in the UK, had been rejected many times. Many questions were asked about why he wasn't removed. Again, people that are primed want to distrust the authorities because they think they're incompetent and keeping people that shouldn't be in the UK out, and also feel like their voices aren't being heard. They are easy fodder for misinformation online. Of course, it's not acceptable to attack a mosque or to think that whoever this person is and whatever background he is, he's representative of his entire community. That's, first of all, insane.
That's what people are doing.
But yes, but the point here is what's happening, the reason why this is happening is because of people feeling, one, like they can't trust the authorities to keep the people who shouldn't be in the UK out of the UK. But secondly, they feel like their concerns are not being heard. There is a huge gap between people who live in Westminster, who control the bodies of basically our ruling elite, and people who live in Southport. I mean, there are many arguments to say move, let's say, the House of Lords or even the House of Commons to places like Southport or York or whatever. So you can see how these people live. So when you ignore their concerns, it's far more difficult to do, actually, because you're actually living within those communities. That's off a bit of a tangent. But the point here is that there are reasons why communities have been primed to look upon other groups of people with suspicion. And I think that needs to be addressed.
I think communities have been primed to certainly blame other people rather than the government that has stripped public services, that has no accountability when it comes to mental health.
People racist and hateful and bigoted.
But is it not the oldest political trick in the book to blame other people, to blame foreigners rather than take accountability?
You have to contextualise this, because whenever I hate the fact that we denigrate certain people, and yes, there are racists in the UK, of course, but I always say draw parallels to South Korea or Japan or Saudi Arabia or Jamaica or any other country on earth. If you were talking to locals from those countries that had concerns about people or communities that are living parallel lives to the main population, or are coming from abroad and settling within their communities and committing acts that are unacceptable, how do you think those people will react? And do you think a Jamaican, for instance, will tolerate being called racist by a Jamaican government? Of course not. But for some reason, that's acceptable here in the UK. And these are the kinds of conversations that we should have. I think the person's identity, the person who killed these children, should have been revealed, because if the government if public bodies have erred by, let's say, not making sure this person shouldn't have had access to a gun or a knife, or had been on the streets, they should take ownership. They should take accountability. The first way to actually get the public's trust is to actually be open and accountable.
We're talking about 17-year-old boy.
I think excellent points that you've made there, and it's perfectly legitimate to ask questions about the origin of where the killer came from, the family. This raises big questions. I mean, we simply do not have the full facts at the moment, but it raises questions about the presence of asylum seekers in the United Kingdom, the scale of that presence, how asylum seekers are allowed into the country. I think that, yes, whether integrating raises major questions.
We don't allow asylum seekers hardly into this country.
Of course, many acts of terror happen from homegrown Brits.
Yeah, I mean, so that's true. But I do think we have to be looking at the background of the killer,
so that you can cast aspersions about massive groups of people.
No, I'm not saying
that's what you just said.
But it is perfectly legitimate to ask about the origin and whether this is related to policies of mass migration into the United Kingdom. That's a perfectly
Can I just
legitimate,
contextualise just to contextualise what he said, just on the
briefly,
asylum
if you
point.
can.
Since 1997, 1 in 5 people that have been arrested for terror offences have been of asylum backgrounds. That's hard data that you can find anywhere on the internet. I think, just to buttress the point, it's perfectly legitimate to ask whether the strategy we have around asylum in this country is fit for purpose and whether it's actually
Okay. Well, let me step in here, because the truth is we are discussing issues around culture, certain religions, asylum, but actually we don't have any such information regarding the individual involved, the suspect who is now in police custody. But next up, we'll be asking, does this reflect a wider breakdown in law and order in this country? We'll debate that with a top Westminster insider next.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Did you ever flirt with the idea of going to America?
Yeah, I was. I've twice happened to be. Once I was offered in Canada the job of a weatherman.
Oh.
Yeah, I was offered that, and I just sort of thought of it. What is the point where your mother, your father would never see you on TV? What's the point of doing it if nobody knows you on it? You know. So I thought.
Big money though, even for a weatherman.
I did. Yeah, it was more than a weather job, but I said no, basically. And then I went and I did this quiz show for Fox TV.
Oh.
Yeah, they said, we want the Irish guy that does the lottery. I think they meant Dermot O'Leary or something. They ended up, they got me, and I couldn't believe it. And I went over to do a daytime version of this. And then 3 days into it, they changed everything, and they said, this is so good, we're putting this out in the evening. And I remember phoning my wife and saying, we're going to have to move out to California.
Oh, wow.
They really want me here, and I'm going down. You know that street with all the palm trees and whatever? That's the way I was going to work, in this limo and whatever. And I had a bungalow there and a golf cart. It was absolutely incredible. Anyway, I'll cut this very long story short. So I'm working really, really bad. A lot of very ignorant people, it has to be said. And really have one regret in my life, that I didn't punch a guy when I was out there. I really would have, if I had my life to live again, I would have really satisfiedly been sacked for punching this git. But basically, anyway, they put the show out. One episode of the show went out, and it came fourth in its rating. So it was behind Lost, it was behind The Biggest Loser, there was something else there.
Fair enough.
Fair enough, and it came fourth, and that was it. It disappeared. 36 shows or so disappeared. Disappeared, never to be shown again.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Go and get another glass of that bubbly, you've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Well, scenes of violent disorder are playing out in Southport, just over 24 hours since the brutal murder of 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class. The Prime Minister was heckled by locals when he laid some flowers at the scene. Let's get reaction from former political editor at LBC, Theo Usherwood, who joins me in the studio. Theo, this is the first major political headache for the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, isn't it?
It's very concerning, Mark, and I would say that Starmer, Yvette Cooper, they haven't been on top of this, because I was speaking to somebody very senior in the Labour Party before the election, who was telling me that one of his big concerns was that there wasn't a plan within the Labour manifesto for community cohesion. Whether what we've seen in Southport tonight, frightening scenes, and whether what we've seen in Greater Manchester following what happened at the airport is very, very worrying.
Leeds as well.
And Leeds as well. And what the government needs to do very quickly is to come up with a plan to bring people together.
Yeah.
I'm not somebody, and I would never advocate the idea of pulling communities apart, but we need to find a way of trying to bring people together. And the government doesn't have a plan for this. It's talked about the economy. It's talking about how to save £22 billion. But this is the real issue. What's happening in the north of England right now is scary, it's frightening, and there's a community up there that's hurting, and whether that be in the wake of what happened in Manchester or in the wake of what happened in Southport. And the government really needs to get a grip of this really quickly, because when you're dealing with riots like this, they're contagious. We saw that back in, 13 years ago with the riots across the country, especially when you have hot weather, and they can spread very, very quickly. And now we have the added pressures of social media as well, which only act as an accelerant for this kind of disorder.
Most definitely. Now, we have no details of this suspect except that they are male and 17 in police custody. It's wrong to speculate about the origins of that person, their religion, their background, you name it, because we just don't know, which is why the violence is impossible to justify that's currently playing out. Of course, these sorts of riots are never acceptable. But notwithstanding what's happening in Southport today and the tragedy of yesterday, Britain is facing a crisis of integration and a crisis around issues of diversity, isn't it? There's major tension in our society, and that's going to dominate the next 5 years of this Labour government.
There may be a you could say there's a crisis of integration. I think more needs to be done, and people need to face this head on, and we need to do it in a way that, as I said, tries to bring people together and foster greater understanding. And at the moment, there is no plan, there is no vacuum. And to be fair, okay, I've criticised Labour with what I was told about a lack of plan within the Labour government, or in the prospective Labour government before the election. But the Tories didn't have a plan for this either. Indeed, if you think back to some of the way ministers behaved in previous administrations within that Tory government, it was pretty despicable with the way that they tried to exacerbate tensions. What we need to be doing, Mark, and it's really crucial that this happens, is actually, getting into communities, whether it's councillor level, whether it's MP level, government level, official level, getting in and trying to promote understanding and try and reduce tensions. Because when we have these incidents, it's no good just stepping back and saying, well, we need an investigation into the particular incident that's happened, namely, in this case, the tragic, this tragic stabbing of 9 children.
And you can't gaslight and condemn people who are concerned about parallel communities and parallel societies.
You obviously have to condemn the violence, but you have to get into the communities. You have to have the people on the ground to speak to people and trying to lay their concerns.
Understand where the anger comes from.
Understand exactly where the anger comes from, because it was senseless what happened yesterday.
OK, let's get on to a bit of the Westminster soap opera. Kemi Badenoch, of course, Tory leadership hopeful, is facing bombshell accusations of bullying and traumatising staff as she attempts to become the next Tory party leader. Earlier, The Guardian exclusively dropped at least three officials found her behaviour so traumatising that they felt they had no other choice but to leave, sources claimed. Already, Kemi has hit back, saying, let's be clear, these allegations are smears from former staff who I sacked after they were accused of bullying behaviour, lying about other colleagues to cover up their own failures, and general gross incompetence. Intolerable behaviour is something I would not stand for. She went on to say the business department has confirmed to The Guardian there were no complaints about me and no investigations. It is all utterly false. Well, is Kemi Badenoch in trouble? Could this impact her campaign to be the next Tory?
There are two ways of looking at this. There's a way of saying, you could say that Conservative MPs will be thinking that Kemi Badenoch attracts trouble, that they're only going to have more of these types of allegations made against her if she becomes leader of the Conservative Party. And then you could say, actually, there may be many Conservative members who quite like the idea of having a Conservative leader who, in a previous guise as a government minister, actually took on the blob, the civil servants. Exactly that. And you know, it may not be a well-received opinion in Westminster, but out there amongst those Conservative members, they might actually think this is something we quite like.
Most definitely. Listen, Theo, thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch up soon. In the next hour, we're going to bring you more on those scenes of violence and disorder in Southport. Of course, it cannot be justified. It's shocking what's happening, but the anger is coming from somewhere. At the moment, it's based on speculation and misinformation. We'll bring you more on that and get closer to the truth in the next hour. Plus, Labour roll over to the unions in a political surrender that's going to cost you and me dearly. I hate to say I told you so. I'll be tackling the Labour government and their total cowardice next.
You really could become the next big Great British Giveaway winner with your chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Listen to what some of our previous winners have to say about winning big with us.
On the day that I got the money in the bank account, everything just seemed a lot sunnier.
But I do have something to spend it on.
Just go for it. It's an absolute must.
Thank you, GBNews.
Amazing feeling to win.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock. This is Patrick Christys tonight with me, Mark Dolan. I'm with you for the next 3 nights. Tensions boil over in Southport as the community struggles to come to terms with the brutal killing of 3 young girls. As disorder hits the streets of Southport, we must not forget the real tragedy, the 3 children taken from their families at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class. Also tonight, 3 weeks into a Labour government and they're already rolling over to the unions. Strap yourselves in for 5 years of strike chaos. My verdict on this political surrender for which you and I will pay the price. That's happening in just a moment.
I believe that anyone who comes here illegally must be deported within days.
It's a hardline approach to immigration, the key to winning the Tory leadership race. I'll sit down with former Conservative MP Miriam Cates. Plus,
football has the power to be the change by building diverse workforces from the inside out.
Does the FA need to push for diversity in choosing future England managers? And as the boss of a nutrition app claims that Britain's obesity crisis has nothing to do with a lack of self-control, is he right that fat people simply can't help themselves? We'll get stuck into those hot topics as I deliver tomorrow's front pages with my panel of top pundits this evening. Social commentator Esther Kraku, former aide to Margaret Thatcher, Niall Gardner, and best-selling author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. A busy hour to go. Let's get to work. More on those violent scenes and disorder in Southport. Plus, who's running the country, Starmer or the unions? That's next.
The top story from the GB newsroom tonight. Police have condemned the disorder which has broken out in Southport in Lancashire, where earlier a vigil was held to remember 3 little girls who were killed in a multiple knife attack. Merseyside police have now issued a dispersal order, giving officers the power to stop and search for weapons. That comes after a police van was set on fire and items were thrown at officers, with one officer believed to have suffered a broken nose. Merseyside police are saying the riot began when a group of people believed to be supporters of the English Defence League threw items at a mosque, adding that 6 arrests have been made. The Assistant Chief Constable, Alex Goss, has called the scenes sickening for a community which is already devastated. That dispersal order will remain in force until 8 p.m. tomorrow night. Well, earlier on today, the Prime Minister paid tribute to the victims of the knife attack in Southport. He was faced, though, some hostile shouts from the crowd as he laid a wreath and stood in silence, some people shouting, "How many more?" Well, the Prime Minister says it is now his mission to crack down on knife crime.
I am very worried about high levels of knife crime, and I'm absolutely determined that my government will get to grips with it. But today is not the time for politics. Today is the time to focus entirely on the families who are going through such pain and grief, and on the wider community, and of course a time to say thank you to those that responded yesterday.
The Prime Minister earlier on today, well, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has described tonight's violent scenes in Southport as appalling. In the last minute, she released a statement warning those responsible will face the full force of the law. Here's what she had to say a short time ago.
So appalling to now see those same police facing violent attacks from thugs on the streets who have no respect for a grieving community. It's a total disgrace. Frankly, this is a time when everyone should be showing respect for a community and for the police.
Home Secretary speaking a short time ago. Well, tonight's disruption in Southport broke out less than 2 hours after the Southport community came together to mark a minute's silence to respect the lives lost, those 3 girls who died in the knife attack. They are 7-year-old Elsie, 9-year-old Alice and 6-year-old Bibi. 5 other children and 2 adults remain in a critical condition in hospital after what was described as a ferocious attack, which took place at a Taylor Swift-themed dance workshop at the start of the school summer holidays. The pop star herself paying tribute, saying she's in shock at the loss of life and horrendous trauma, adding these were just little kids. Let's bring you an update on news we shared earlier from Ireland. We now know 2 men have died after a helicopter crashed into a farm building in County Westmeath. Both were on board the chopper when it came down this afternoon near the village of Cullecan. The men, who are understood to be from Ireland and Eastern Europe, were in their 40s. The Irish Air Investigation Unit is understood to be looking at what happened. And finally, Great Britain have taken gold in the pool tonight, putting us 7th in the medal table. The British quartet James Guy, Tom Dean, Matthew Richards and Duncan Scott led from the start and powered to the top of the podium. The US came in second, winning silver, with Australia stealing a bronze. It marks the 3rd time in a row Britain has won a medal in the 4x200 metre relay, after winning first in Rio, then Tokyo and now Paris 2024. Those are the latest GB News headlines. I'm back in an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. The punishment beating of the Tories on Thursday, the 4th of July, has come at a high price. Rishi Sunak and ex-Chancellor Jeremy Hunt faced down the trade unions, which saw the country come closer to balancing the books and taming inflation from over 10% a year ago to 2% now. But unfortunately, in what I fear will become the biggest I told you so in history, this new Labour government, which is just 26 days old, has already rolled over to the union barons' inflation-busting, unaffordable wage demands. Rachel Reeves complains about a black hole. Well, she's creating one here that wouldn't look out of place in Star Wars. As I've said previously, Labour are in no position to stand up to the unions because they are funded by them. And they are in no position to stand up to the public sector, who are their electoral constituency. The end result is a political surrender which will cost you and me dearly. Junior doctors will get an eye-watering 22%, even though most are on track for a big salary anyway, a job for life and a gold-plated pension. Nurses and teachers will see a boost of 5.5%, double the rate of inflation, with our new Chancellor Rachel Reeves having no idea how that's going to be paid for. After all, she's only just found out that the country's broke. Have you not heard? I'm very surprised about that, by the way. We're always being told that she worked for the Bank of England. Has she lost her talent for mathematics? Well, let me tell you, on this one, her sums don't add up. We love the doctors, we love the nurses, we love the teachers. I wish that everyone could get a new pay deal. But we're skint, and until the country lives within its means, wage restraint is critical. Labour's answer is yet more taxes, which will kill economic growth and investment. This comment from political commentator and proponent of something called luxury communism, Ash Sarkar, is very telling. Responding to the junior doctors' pay deal, she tweeted, "Strikes work. What can I say?" What can I say indeed? Well, I have no words. Because such a quick acquiescence to the union's demands spells trouble for the next 5 years. Do you honestly think that other sectors won't want a piece of the action, having seen that, and I quote, strikes work? I'm old enough to remember industrial action in the 1980s. It's damaging to the workers involved, it hurts our competitiveness, and it impacts consumers, and it destroys the economy. For her many faults, it was Margaret Thatcher who faced down the unions, leading to an economic miracle, which saw the emancipation of the British working class and the birth of an aspirational, productive, efficient, dynamic, entrepreneurial, wealth-creating nation. But now the unions are back in the driving seat. It feels like the 1970s all over again, but this time without the bell-bottoms, the good music, and angel delight for pudding. In the 1970s, challenging the power of the unions, the Tories had a famous election slogan, "Who runs Britain?" Well, at the moment, it's not Sir Keir Starmer or this Labour government. For reaction to that, my top panel this evening, columnist and broadcaster Esther Kraku, also former special advisor to Margaret Thatcher, Niall Gardner, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Great to see all three of you. Well, who better to start with than Niall Gardner? It's important that unions exist, but they're not out of control, which is what happened in the 80s, and I think is happening again.
Yeah, exactly, Mark, and great opening remarks there, and I fully agreed, I think, with every word there. And already you have Keir Starmer and the Labour government surrendering to the trade unions. It is indeed the 1970s all over again, frankly. Yeah. And you're seeing this new socialist government headed by Keir Starmer already kowtowing to trade union power, and the unions are already starting to run Britain. It's not the Labour government in charge, it's actually the trade unions. This is a very dangerous course. In the 1970s, it led to the bankruptcy of Great Britain. We could see the same result again thanks to these clueless policies advanced by Keir Starmer.
Well, that's right.
This is grovelling to the unions.
This is a deal with just one union, which is the BMA, the British Medical Association, which is a union.
But not affiliated to Labour.
Right, but other sectors will follow, will they not?
Oh, absolutely. This is just the shape of things to come. You are going to see Labour surrendering to union after union. Eventually, the unions will have full control, frankly, over Britain, more power than Keir Starmer. And what a catastrophic result that would be.
Well, I think the unions already control this government. What do you think, Amy?
I think that we've just seen 5 years of strikes from all public sector
yes,
workers.
That's right, strikes and no yielding to the wishes of
just
the
really expensive strikes that cost,
worth every penny.
That also costs billions in agency staff because of the recruitment and retention problems that come from not paying people properly. All our doctors leaving to go to Australia.
18
teachers leaving to work abroad.
Over 11%. It's now 2% because the last government faced down the unions. We also balanced the books to.
Do you know what? It's good to work with the unions. It's good to settle these disputes. It's a good thing that the doctors are paid properly. It's a good thing that they're not still being paid the same as a barista.
Will you take the billions that are going to the junior doctors? Which budget does that come out of?
Which budget? What do you mean?
Well, where are you going to get the money from?
There is so much money. There is so much money.
Where is the money? We're running a deficit.
For example, closing inheritance tax loopholes, 4 billion.
OK, so that's going to affect investment and reduce economic growth.
How do you work that out?
Because the bottom line is it's a disincentive.
So people have to be incentivised to break tax law.
And also, your plan changes to inheritance tax will be an absolute drop in the ocean.
4 billion.
This is
I think with again, that's. Which
also, it costs.
Money
do you know it costs it's not, so much?
It's not rocket science, but I think we are
to pay for the industrial action as well.
Moving a bit on a tangent, and I think we're simplifying this. I don't think we should compare the NHS and the BMA to other sectors, because I think that's different to hospitality unions and all of that. I think that's completely different. Quite frankly, the junior doctors are acting like a cartel. Now, I don't blame them because, of course, if you can argue for more money, you will. But the reality is no one in the private sector can say that because of I've received a 35% pay cut, which is actually not a pay cut, it's just inflation, and therefore you owe me 35% 10 years down the line. You can't do that anywhere in the private sector, but the doctors can because we don't have enough of them, and therefore they can...
And why don't we have enough of them?
So listen, here's the point. I think at some point Keir Starmer's government would have been strong-armed into some sort of deal with the unions. But now he must be honest and say the NHS is in a state of emergency, because you cannot have a few people holding the government to ransom and basically indebting the country but to the tune of billions. It's completely unsustainable. The reality is this is one of the problems with a top-down, basically socialised healthcare model. There is no competition. If you have doctors saying, if you don't pay me this much, you leave, you can't let them leave because we only have the NHS. You have to have more private involvement because at the end of the day, us talking about we love the doctors, we love the nurse, that's great, but they're doing a job. We should love the patients.
I think I would agree with you if it wasn't the case of £20 an hour.
I think that's absolutely right. You know, socialism never works. And the NHS system, of course, is hugely inefficient. And you have, you know, the government being sort of blackmailed by unions here. And yes, exactly. This is unsustainable. It's not good for the British people here, and this is public money. This is taxpayers' money here that Labour is using. Eventually, they're going to run out of that money
because we'll be spending so much money, and all the results of having an unfunctioning healthcare system. A functioning healthcare system saves money across the board.
Well, look, the French have a functioning healthcare system. You don't see their doctors holding the state by the...
We just had a whole conversation about mental health and mental health waiting lists and everything. This is all linked.
Do you condemn the strikes given that 1 million appointments were cancelled, which is no doubt going to have led to lost lives?
No, I condemn poorly paid doctors
with the
for
cancellation
years
of 1 million
and years and years. Of course, I'm not okay with that. But I'm saying you negotiate.
The strikes?
I don't condemn. Hang on a minute. Do I condemn the strikes? Of course, I don't condemn the strikes. I condemn the government for not negotiating like Keir Starmer has to settle the strike.
Yeah, settle or roll over. Listen, folks, a great
by paying doctors properly.
We will come back to that. Where's the money going to come from? Coming up, I will bring you a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. Plus, does the FA need to push for diversity in choosing future England managers? But next up, would a hard-line approach to immigration be the key to winning the Tory leadership race? Rob Jenrick thinks so. OK, folks, we'll get to that very shortly. It is all about the runners and the riders for the second biggest job in politics, leader of the Tory party. That's next.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Oh no, just when I thought it was safe, here we go round again. The target this time is one of the most recognisable landmarks in London. Standing at 176 feet tall, the Albert Memorial was commissioned by Queen Victoria in 1862 to honour her late husband, Prince Albert, and was built 10 years later, a year and a century before I was born. Now, situated in Hyde Park, the monument depicts a gold statue of the Prince, alongside 4 groups of large statues which represent the 4 continents of the world: Asia, America, Africa and Europe. Now, the statues representing Asia include a woman on an elephant. America is represented by a Native American with a bison. Africa shows a woman riding a camel, and there's a white European woman reading a book to a black African tribesman. Now, the Royal Parks website claims that these statues draw on racial stereotypes. The Royal Parks, who manage parks in London, deemed it as highly offensive because it reflects a Victorian view of the world. Of course, it reflects a Victorian view of the world. It was built in the Victorian era by request of Queen Victoria. Shock, horror. And it only reflects this view, if you even know what that is. Why would this be offensive? Surely you could at least appreciate the fact and the feat of this artwork, which is quite impressive, even now. Daily Mail journalist Robert Hardman went on a tour of those incredible tunnels, and he said it goes on and on like the catacombs until you realise that you're actually going round and round a series of concentric circles. This is a monument in itself to the technical rigour and pride which went into the Victorian engineering. Exactly.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you're just joining us, violent scenes of disorder are playing out in Southport just 24 hours after the brutal murder of 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class. You'll see there a vehicle on fire. One particular male police officer got into his van with what looked like a severe head injury, some sort of gash to his head. So there is anger. The police are handling the situation. Bricks are being thrown and a local mosque has been attacked. This violence has got to be condemned in the most significant and robust way. And those are the words of the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. The violence can't be justified because we still know so little about the alleged attacker, only that they are male and 17 years of age. But clearly there is anger about what happened yesterday. That's understandable. The violence is not. Let's get reaction now from former Conservative MP Miriam Cates. Miriam, first of all, your reaction to the scenes currently playing out in Southport.
It looks extremely concerning. I mean, I don't know what the direct cause is yet. I don't think that's been established. I've seen rumours on Twitter, but I haven't seen anything concrete. But clearly there's a very febrile atmosphere in the country at the moment. These are not the first riots we've seen just in the last few weeks. We've had Rochdale, Hare Hills, and of course, since last October, we've had weekly protests on the streets of London. And it's a very concerning time. And a lot of these riots seem to have different causes, but deep down, there are clearly some cultural tensions that have come upon this country, and it's very concerning.
Indeed. Is this a crisis for Britain's multicultural society? I'm not talking specifically about what happened in Southport yesterday, because we don't have the details or the anger today, but there is general anger within our communities around tensions regarding parallel communities and people living parallel lives.
Yes, I think that's very fair. And I think in just a generation, we've gone from a pretty homogenous monoculture in Britain, I suppose. Yes, with some diversity, but with a kind of principal culture. And now we do have multiculturalism, and there may be benefits to that, but there are also some quite severe tensions that can be built up. And I think we've pretended, or certainly Liberals have pretended for a long time, that all cultures can live side by side. Well, they can't. I mean, that just isn't true. Not all cultures can integrate. Not all cultures do integrate. And of course, there will be tensions when they don't. So as I said, I don't know the direct cause of these riots. No violence like this can ever be justified. But it does point to an increasingly febrile atmosphere here in Britain. And we're seeing similar things in France. So I do think it's very worrying. And I think the authorities are going to face very tough questions, because, of course, you can be very heavy-handed in situations like this, but that doesn't actually solve the underlying problems, and those are perhaps the kind of things that politicians need to be thinking about.
Well, indeed, you know, Southport to one side, all of our communities need to follow the rule of law and British values. Miriam, let's get to a much jollier subject: the Tory leadership. The candidates are now confirmed, with James Cleverly, Robert Jenrick, Tom Tugendhat, Mel Stride, Priti Patel and Kemi Badenoch all throwing their hats into the ring. And former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick has set out his stall early by promising to take a hardline approach to legal and illegal immigration.
When I was Minister for Immigration, I saw dangerous people coming into our country. I saw us unable to deport them. I saw hundreds of thousands of people we frankly didn't need coming in legally, but our politics was unable or unwilling to deliver what was needed. The new government aren't going to fix things. They have too many delusions. I believe that anyone who comes here illegally must be deported within days. I believe that ending mass migration won't be plain sailing, but we must do it.
So, Miriam, is immigration the defining issue facing the next Tory leader?
I think it's certainly one of them, and the reason for that is it was the issue that came up most on the doorstep as the source of people's betrayal of trust, I suppose. So on the economy, on the NHS, yes, people had concerns, but they recognised that events like COVID had a severe impact on the economy and the NHS, and actually no government could have smoothed that over completely. But I think when it comes to immigration, people did just see it as a direct betrayal of trust. They voted for lower immigration and they got much higher immigration. And whether that was a mistake or deliberate on the part of the government doesn't really matter. It was a betrayal of trust. So I do think that in terms of winning back people's trust, it is the number one issue. Now, obviously in opposition, there's nothing that the Conservatives can actually do about it. Develop policy, we can commit to doing things like leaving the ECHR, but of course it's not possible for any of the opposition to prove themselves in the way that you can in government, so it's a difficult task. But I do think of all the candidates, and they all have strengths, don't get me wrong, but of all the candidates, I do think Robert Jenrick has the most understanding, having been in the Home Office, of what's gone wrong and what technically needs to be done to fix it. So I do think he has a lot of very relevant things to say on that issue.
Is Kemi Badenoch a bully, and has she ever shouted at you?
No and no. I think she's absolutely brilliant. She certainly knows how to conduct herself in an argument. We've seen her in select committees and things like that, not allowing people to get away with saying things that aren't true or making allegations. And I think that fighting spirit, that feistiness is certainly would be brilliant in taking the fight to Labour. And too often, I think these days, people who don't like being criticised or who don't like someone calling them out for behaviour decide that that's bullying, when actually it's just the normal everyday thing of life that you just have to get on with. So of course she is the favourite. Unfortunately, that means that people are going to try and take you out. That does seem to be happening, but no, I think she's always, certainly from what I've seen, conducted herself very professionally. Yes, she's feisty, but she never crosses the line.
There you go. Well, Kemi Badenoch there responding to allegations published in The Guardian about bullying behaviour whilst she was business secretary. Miriam, great to see you and loved having you on the channel as a brand new GB News presenter. Are you enjoying life in the real world?
You know, I am. And, you know, of course, there are bits about Parliament that I'll miss and being an MP, and it is an incredible job and such a privilege. But it's also completely overwhelming in the way it takes over your life. So it is nice to have a little bit more of a slower pace of life and a little bit more choice about how I spend my time. So, yes, I'm enjoying that freedom.
Well, I look forward to bumping into you in the GB News canteen very soon. My thanks to Miriam Cates there, former Tory politician, MP, and, of course, current GB News star. Lots more to come, including tomorrow's papers, more on the violence in Southport. Plus, how about this? Do the FA need to push for diversity in choosing the next England manager? We'll discuss that next.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. The high temperatures, the high humidity will continue across the southern parts through the next few days, and that brings the risk of some thunderstorms. High pressure is generally in control, leading to a lot of fine and settled weather, but there is a weak front across northern parts of Scotland, and here it is a bit fresher than elsewhere. But as we go through the night, do watch out for some hefty showers pushing into southern parts of England. Some of these could have the odd bit of thunder mixed in as well, and there may be a few pockets of mist and fog, but across southern parts it's really going to be a warm and sticky night. Temperatures really holding up. A much fresher story further north. In fact, in some of the rural spots, the sheltered glens of Scotland, we could fall as low as 4 or 5 Celsius. So a bit of a fresher, chilly start across Scotland first thing, and that front I mentioned earlier bringing some outbreaks of rain to the Northern Isles. Otherwise, it's a dry, bright and sunny story for many. A bit more cloud perhaps across parts of Northern Ireland and some parts of Northern England. A bit of a grey start here, but elsewhere across much of England and Wales, any mist and fog patches that do develop overnight will quickly be burnt away by the sun, and there will be plenty of sunshine and plenty of blue skies. That being said, we are expecting a few more showers to develop as we go into the afternoon, particularly across southern southeastern parts, and these showers could be fairly intense. Some heavy downpours, some frequent lightning, some thunder and hail all could lead to some issues. The temperatures are still going to be on the high side, just about getting into the low 30s across the south. Fresher than this, though, further north, similar to today. High teens, low 20s, so feeling warm enough in any sunshine. Into Thursday, and the heavy thunderstorms are going to be a bit more widespread. Across much of England and Wales, there is the risk of some thundery downpours. Meanwhile, across Scotland and Northern Ireland, a few showers are possible, and it is going to be a little bit cloudy at times. Friday's looking like it will be a bit drier for many before something fresher and wetter by the weekend. Bye-bye.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's time now for tomorrow's News Tonight in our press pack. We start with the Metro newspaper. Holiday club stabbing victims, our little innocents. Families of 3 girls knifed to death at a holiday kids club have paid tribute to them as it emerged 2 women were critically injured, saving 16 more. The Eye now, no words can describe our devastation. Families pay tribute to the 3 girls killed in Southport's mass stabbing. Bebe 6, Elsie 7 and Alice, aged 9. Of course, Alice passed away earlier today. Guardian, you can't help but cry. Hundreds pay tribute to stabbing victims. And Kemi Badenoch traumatised and bullied senior staff, say The Guardian, in a story that Kemi Badenoch has denied. Israel targets Hezbollah commander in Beirut is the other story. Daily Mail, Southport stabbing horror. Alice, aged 9, Elsie, aged 7, Bebe, aged 6. Faces of the innocent little Taylor Swift fans killed in cold blood by a despicable human being. We're going to get reaction from my top press pack this evening. We've got columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow, former special advisor to Margaret Thatcher, flown in from the United States to be with us, Niall Gardner, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner. Well, I'm afraid more scenes of disorder. Essex Police launched a dispersal zone in Southend earlier this evening after reports hundreds of people have flocked to the city for a so-called beach party advertised on TikTok. There have also been reports of young people running around with enormous knives. Footage from social media shows 2 people running around with large knives. Multiple police, the Essex Police helicopter and ambulance crews have also been in the centre of the town this evening dealing with the incident. Videos on social media also show a large crowd running away from the seafront en masse and heading towards the high street. Now, 6 people have been arrested, so we can't discuss the specifics of this shocking footage. But this really looks, doesn't it, Amy, to be lawless Britain?
It does. All I can think is, you know, we've been through a lot as a country with Brexit, we had COVID.
So are you blaming Brexit for knife crime?
I didn't hear that.
Well, you didn't let me finish the point.
People going around with machetes because of Brexit.
If you think back to that time, it was incredibly divisive. Referendums bring out the extremes, they bring out division.
Do you think that lad with the machete you just saw, is he a Remainer?
The whole point is...
Let Amy make her point first.
Rewind. Lawless Britain, start. No Brexit. Go.
Well, OK, what's your explanation then?
No, just...
It's not...
No, are you blaming knife crime on Brexit?
I'm saying that there is obviously something that has led to the behaviour we're seeing now. I would say it is Brexit followed by COVID, followed by being absolutely broke and having our public services trashed.
How has Brexit caused people to go around with machetes?
As you'll see, there was a little stepping stones, wasn't there? But Brexit divided us. It put us against each other. That sowed the seeds of division.
The people with machetes, are they Remainers?
I would say...
Are they Lib Dem voters, do you think?
I know you think it's all big, jolly and silly,
well, I think
but
it's the
it was a starting point.
I've probably ever heard in all my life.
So you don't think Brexit was divisive?
I don't think Brexit has caused people to go around with machetes.
But as I said, Brexit, pandemic, public services. So what do you think it is?
This is a new nadir for Brexit.
What do you think it is then? What do you think it is?
I think it's poverty, inequality. I think it's young people without a stake in society. I think it's gangs. I think it's drug abuse and the drug industry. And I think it's also woke policing. There you go.
Woke policing.
Yeah.
I think that is the most nonsense thing I've heard.
On spending money on rainbow flags for their cars and visiting people in their houses for an unkind Facebook post.
That is woke derangement syndrome.
I don't think it's deranged. I think it's rational.
Respond.
Esther, it's all yours.
Yep.
Do your worst. And then Niall's ready.
Yes.
OK. I'm just going to pretend like I didn't hear the last 90 seconds of conversation that just happened. So knife crime in the UK. Clearly, what we're doing is not working because over the last 10 years, knife crime incidents have gone up by 78%. The policing side of the issue, while not straightforward, is a bit more obvious, which is increase stop and search, actually penalise people that are carrying knives, find a way to make manufacturers of these horrible ghost, like zombie knives and all of that, have some sort of tracking system. Obviously, you can't do that with kitchen knives and tools for workmen, but you can do that for the kinds of cutlasses and instruments that these young people are choosing to carry. They're not carrying kitchen knives, surprisingly. They're carrying machetes and zombie knives. So there's that. But on the society front, because society does have a role to play here, it's not all on the government or the police.
Correct.
We need to be questioning the culture and the types of homes, the households that are producing young people that think it's acceptable to roam our streets, to terrorise the British public with these types of knives. And unfortunately, that's a very uncomfortable situation, because the kinds of people that you're seeing carrying knives, engaging in knife crime, going to prison mainly, are not privately educated, public school boys from Chelsea, right? They're usually ethnic minority, predominantly males under 25 that grow up in single-parent, predominantly single-mother-led homes. And that is the reason why we need to get to grips with this, because we are talking about effectively an underclass of Britain that are obviously socioeconomically deprived, but also culturally are do not feel like they live in a country that they have a stake in. They're engrossed in a culture that thinks it's acceptable to be walking around with knives. Some of them use it as a protection because they feel like if they don't have it, they can't protect themselves from other knife-carrying people, which increases the likelihood of knife crime. It's absurd.
And these young people don't have a stake in our society, and they don't have British values. And they are British, but they don't share in British values. They have no respect for the rule of law, Niall.
Yeah, exactly. And I must respond to the comments earlier about Brexit, because I think that's straight out of the Twilight Zone, really.
It's interesting, though, because all of you said that it's about having a stake in society and having opportunities. Brexit has removed a lot of those.
Brexit
OK, go ahead.
does not cause gangs of marauding thugs and hooligans
but just to be honest, that's not what I said, and you know that's not what I said.
You're blind.
Let me help you. The British economy has outperformed the Eurozone since Brexit, so if anything...
I don't need your help. I just said to sit on this sofa week in, week out to see how much Brexit has divided us.
Brexit's actually been a great... Brexit's been a great blessing for Britain. Let me just say, with these hooligans, thugs on the streets, they need to be serving long sentences in jail, right? Okay, we need to be locking these people up for very long periods.
Don't need a lot of prisons.
Need more prisons, more police, end of the woke policing on the streets, and we need to see real strong law and order in place to deal with increasing lawlessness. And also, we need an education system whereby, people in schools are actually taught British values, respect for British culture, heritage, history and tradition.
Well, I mean,
they should love their nation. And I think what we are seeing, this lawlessness is a result of decades of socialist-style thinking, where people view themselves as victims. We do need to see really strong policing, strong sentences. We need to lock up these hooligans.
I think young people are victims.
For very long periods.
They've been through so much.
There will never be enough police to police poorly raised children who have now become adults. That's just the reality. Unfortunately, you have to put the onus on the households that are producing these young people with these perverse values. That is the point. What types of households are producing the kinds of young people that think it's acceptable to walk around with zombie knives to potentially terrorise themselves, the public or members of their gangs or whatever? That's the issue. You can teach British values as much as you want in schools. These people are living within a subculture that are far removed, not just from British values, but within the communities that they're growing up in. There's a bigger issue and there's a bigger conversation to be had here. And unfortunately, we're not even like sort of scratching the surface, because we can't even get to grips with the fact that people are flagrantly carrying knives on the back of buses in places like Brighton. I mean, they don't care. They're not scared at all. It's so brazen and it's so shameless.
Well, I don't know if you've got that footage, Matthew and Harry, but let's see if we can get that up, because that was footage of a youngster on the back of a bus holding an enormous knife. Again, an everyday scene in broken Britain. Amy, we disagree over the origins of this and the cause, but what is the solution?
Well, you completely misrepresented what I was saying, but OK, carry on.
Well, I think just saying Brexit was absurd, but you're entitled to your view. What is the answer?
It's a knife crime.
How do we fix it?
Well, you could start by recruiting more police officers that the last government cut.
Sure. I think
you could fund youth services that the last government cut.
I think that's a fair point.
And you could, I don't know, what do you think? I've completely given up on this conversation.
We should be locking them up.
Have you gone on strike, just like the junior doctors? Listen, I'll give you an extra 20% to keep talking. Paid for by Rachel Rees.
We've got to make them pay a penalty for this kind of crime. And they get away with this.
The thing is, I don't think we're going to do anything.
Footage. Take a look at this, and this has become the norm now. This is Britain in 2024.
Where did he get that?
It's not even a story. I mean, on the back of a bus, which is illegal, wielding a knife, 20 years ago, Niall, there would have been a manhunt for this guy.
Yeah,
now it's just a viral video.
There should be 10 years in jail for that, right?
Yeah.
10 years in jail.
But what about preventative measures?
Well, like stop and search, which have been cut because apparently it's racist. I mean, even though every time stop and search is done, 1 in 5 times stop and search is done.
Well, is it racist?
Is it
racist, Esther?
Well, no, because the thing is, police... Then all policing is racist because police work with profiles. So if you say someone's committed a crime and they were a 6-foot-tall white male and they need to be stopped and searched, no one has anything to say. But when it's in communities with large groups of ethnic minorities, then suddenly it's horrible. I'm not saying that policing has been done perfectly, or there hasn't been a breakdown of trust with police forces, particularly in communities that have high ethnic minority populations. I do think you need to bring back local policing with actual teeth, and you need to be serious about it. That's absolutely valid. But the reality is, this is not just about protecting one group of people, it's about protecting the British public. And we have to see what's better for the wider good, and that is stop and search.
OK, what do you think, Amy? Do you think we should have more stop and search?
No, I don't think it's good for the wider public. I think it's a bit like saying, right, we want to stop people dying on the road, so we're going to make everyone drive at 10 miles an hour.
No, but that doesn't make sense.
I think stop and search causes more harm than good, based on people's experiences. You get people who are stopped...
One at a time, Amy.
I'm going based on results, not about feelings. It's the most effective...
So that's what I'm saying. If you want results, you could do so many things. You could
when stop and search...
But stop and search is more stop and traumatise, isn't it?
When stop and search goes up, knife crime goes down.
Yes. But at what cost? Why don't you think about the other things that you could...
I want knives off the road.
But there are preventative things that we're not doing that we could do before we enact stop and search more violently.
One thing.
And Amy, briefly...
You can do multiple things at the same time.
Briefly, how do we fix the values in our society? How do we fix our broken communities and
maybe give
these
people
homes?
a bit of a stake in society so that they can actually like a house, maybe to start with, maybe a bit of connection, community, that type of thing. Good public services, you know, pay doctors.
Well, so junior doctors get a pay rise and there'll be less knife crime. That's up there with Brexit. Niall, brief last word if you can.
Yes. Stop and search, of course, works. It's highly effective. It should be fully implemented. But also, where you have crimes committed by illegal migrants here, they should be deported. Send them out of the country. They should not be here.
OK, agree on that one. Coming up, is Suella Braverman an outstanding and courageous former Home Secretary? One of my panellists thinks so. We'll debate that in tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next, as the boss of a nutrition app claims that obesity has nothing to do with a lack of self-control, is he right that fat people simply can't help it? Plus more stories from the papers. See you in 2.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, to enrich us on the best cheeses and wine to buy, I'm delighted to be joined by the CEO of Inflorescence, Jacinta Madison-Wilson. Jacinta, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you so much for having me.
Also, thank you so much for bringing what is
what a Sunday you're having.
of wonderful... What do we have before us?
So, we've got 3 gorgeous wines to try today. We've got an English sparkling, we've got a beautiful rosé and a dessert wine, and, of course, cheese.
Wonderful.
And paired them all beautifully.
Now, English sparkling wine has had a bit of a renaissance.
Oh, it's incredible, isn't it?
To use a French word to describe English sparkling wine. It's having a bit of a moment in the sun.
Absolutely. I just think it's so exciting that this is right on our doorstep, essentially, an hour out of London, and we're around beautiful vineyards.
The chalk sort of sediment is exactly the same as the Champagne region of France.
Yeah, our soils are really similar. We use the same grape varieties a lot of the time. We make it in exactly the same way as Champagne. Our climate is like Champagne was 40 to 50 years ago. So we're really kind of drinking it blind. You almost wouldn't know that you're not drinking champagne. But it's right here on our doorstep. We can stay local now.
Absolutely marvellous. Well, we've got... what is the best order to start?
OK, well, we're going to start with sparkling, because all things in life should start with sparkling. I got married a month ago, and this was actually the... Thank you so much. This was the wine I chose to have as our first wine that we served the guests. This is from a winery called Bluebell, which is in Sussex, and I've chosen to pair this with a lovely... kind of the English version of Camembert, which is called Tunworth. It's a very classic pairing of champagne and brie. So we're kind of going to do the English version of that now.
Classic.
Absolutely. Are you ready to get stuck in?
I am so...
OK.
Hang on. Is it cheese first or wine first?
I'd have a little sip of the wine first.
Sip of the wine, bite
have
of the
a little
cheese.
bite of the cheese and then some more wine. Get it all mixed up in there.
It's like a cheese sandwich.
Exactly. Yes.
OK, here
Cheers.
we go. Cheers.
GB News, the People's Channel.
More front pages, and we start with The Telegraph, and they lead with... They lead with violence erupts over child killings. Riot police clash with mob at Southport Mosque, despite ministers' warning for public to stop stirring discontent. No room to build on Greenbelt. That's nonsense, says Angela Rayner. Rachel Reeves admits she will have to raise taxes in the autumn budget. In other news, the Pope practices Catholicism. The Independent now, and no words to describe the devastation that has hit our family. As police named the 3 girls killed in the Southport dance class knife attack, the family of the youngest, 6-year-old Bebe, share their anguish. And Daily Mirror, a town in tears. Keep smiling and keep dancing. Heartbreaking tributes to 3 young victims of Kids Club knife attack. OK, well, let's move on now. Let's get reaction to the big stories of the day with Esther Kraku, Niall Gardner and Amy Nicole Turner. And does obesity have nothing to do with a lack of self-control? That is the view of the boss of nutrition app Zoe. According to Jonathan Wolfe, ultra-processed foods are to blame for the profound damage that's been done to people's appetite control over the previous 10, 20 and 30 years. So, Amy, is obesity the fault of the overweight person, or are they victims of a toxic food environment?
There is room for personal responsibility, but we live in a food environment which contains ultra-processed foods, which are so awful that they will probably one day come with a health warning. And also, we need to incorporate hormones, we need to incorporate genetics, which play a massive role in this as well.
Definitely. I mean, we are surrounded, aren't we, by junk food. When you go to the supermarket, you know, most of the aisles are filled with these ultra-processed foods, things in boxes with 1 million ingredients, which all taste delicious.
But there's an island where they did nuclear testing. Do you know about this?
No.
And they couldn't eat the food produced there. So the Americans sent them ultra-processed food. Guess what? They're all enormous.
Unbelievable.
So there's your little social experiment. Done and dusted, there's your evidence.
I agree with you that it's much harder to be healthy and to remain of a healthy weight, particularly in the developed countries, mainly the US. I mean, I can't eat when I go to the US. I find the food disgusting.
And so hard to navigate.
It's horrible. It's horrible. Because it's just full of hormones, these unreadable ingredients. Fats. Exactly, all of that. And so I do appreciate that it's a much harder environment to stay healthy. But ultimately, it does come down to the individual and the choices that they make. And obesity isn't just about eating too much and too much of the wrong stuff. It's also about exercise, and on that point, it's entirely up to the individual. Tesco can't make you go running. You have to choose to go running.
Niall, this is a big problem for health systems around the world. Obesity could bankrupt the NHS eventually.
It could do, but I've just got to respond to the point about food in America and
because you've just flown in from the States.
Yes. It's where you live. There's a lot of great food in America, and
no, I don't doubt that. But
isn't that because you're a bit posh and you can go to Whole Foods? You've got a budget for Whole Foods.
I do not go to Whole Foods. But I'll say this: that in America, the vast majority of people are against all of these government regulations about what you can and cannot eat. You know, it's a free country. You don't have the nanny state telling you what you can and cannot eat. And that's right. The government has no role in this. People should be able to decide what they eat, but of course people should watch their weight and you know how many calories a day they eat and so on. But it's not the role of the government to tell them you cannot eat this or that, or you can't eat processed food. And so the United States, of course, is based upon the principles of individual liberty and freedom. That's the way it should be. And all of this nanny state stuff.
I think I agree with you. What I would say is information, not instruction. We should have done that during COVID, shouldn't we? Give people information, not instruction. If you want my recommendation, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert, but Michael Mosley, the late great Michael Mosley, his book, The Fast 800 Keto, was amazing for me. I lost 3 stone.
I've got that.
If you're going to change your diet, consult your doctor. Quick one. Do we need to address a lack of diversity in English football management? Currently, there are just 2 black managers out of the 92 in the top tiers of English football. The FA are concerned about this and want to work harder to ensure there are candidates from ethnic minority backgrounds who could eventually be England manager. Estu, this is important, isn't it?
It's probably not going to happen because there's too much riding on it. I think whenever you talk about sort of having diversity hires in particular industries, it's usually the unimportant jobs. No serious person talks about a kind of diversity pushes for like pilots or eye surgeons or football managers that are paid a lot and there are high expectations on what the results that they produce. And so, one, I don't think it's going to happen. And two, I don't think that's a very necessary approach. Just hire the best person for the job.
Well, what do you think about this? It's a debate that rages in America with these sort of diversity... Is it diversity, equity and inclusion policies?
DEI, yes. Yeah, that's correct. A big debate over that. And I think a growing backlash against DEI policies, which are fundamentally wrong because they are about racial discrimination, and that should never be acceptable. And the England manager should be decided based on ability, quality, experience, not on the colour of one's skin. And let's remember the words of Martin Luther King Jr., who said that we should not judge people by their skin colour, but by their character, really, and by their ability. And that's the right approach here. No one should be selected based upon the colour of their skin or discriminated against based on the colour of their skins.
No, but briefly, Amy, I agree with Niall, but actually black managers are massively underrepresented within British football, and it is a problem, isn't it?
Yes, especially because they're overrepresented in terms of black football players. Now, players normally end up managers, so you'd think they would be represented at 43%, if anything. So the FA have said that there is a problem, and meritocracy surely only comes from levelling the playing field.
I think the reason. So one of the reasons why you see such a sort of low kind of uptake from black football players becoming managers is because of the kind of the culture within the manager. So who's who?
Okay.
So they tend to be quite friendly.
Briefly, Amy.
Together and stuff like that, and they don't tend to be within that core. I do think it's a problem because you might be overlooking great black football players that are managers. But again, it should be based on talent.
Okay.
Of course, and that's what it's about, levelling the field so that the talent can be evenly distributed.
OK, fascinating stuff. Now it's time for my pundits to nominate their greatest Britain and Union jackass. OK, quick if you can. Esther, your greatest Britain.
Well, Britons, the victims of the Southport attack. I don't think there's really any more deserving.
I know, well said. Niall, your greatest Britain today.
Suella Braverman, who announced that she was not running for the leadership of the Conservative Party, but she is a great Conservative. She was an outstanding Home Secretary, and I think she really stands up for millions of Britons who wish to see Conservative policies implemented, and I think she's a very inspirational figure.
Amy Nickel, your greatest Britain. I saw you nodding your head there to Suella Braverman.
Every word. Joel Verity, he's this amazing guy who was there yesterday in Southport, and he stepped in to help rescue some of the children when they were being attacked. He's a personal trainer. I think he was just driving by and he heard some screams and helped the situation.
Well, let me tell you that Joel Verity is my winner. What a brilliant nomination. A truly heroic guy. And someone that will always have your back. Briefly now, your Union jackass, Esther.
The Olympics for allowing biological male to box a female player.
Oh, absolutely. Niall, your Union jackass.
David Lammy, he should not be Foreign Secretary. Embarrassing, really. He's already kowtowing to the European Union. He's been terrible on the Middle East. He said appalling things about Donald Trump, which is going to cause huge problems, I think, for the UK if Trump wins the presidency.
Disaster. Amy, a couple of seconds if you can.
So this story of Bob Ballard, the Eurosports commentator who said, the women are off doing their makeup, burst out laughing. His co-presenter was like, you're outrageous. He's lost his job through this, and I think it's awful, especially when you consider that there's a child rapist at the Olympics.
Amy, I completely agree with you, but I'm going to give it to Esther and the Olympics. Worst Olympics we've ever had. I'm back tomorrow from 9, thanks to the team and my lovely pundits. Headliners is next. See you tomorrow.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. The high temperatures, the high humidity will continue across the southern parts through the next few days, and that brings the risk of some thunderstorms. High pressure is generally in control, leading to a lot of fine and settled weather, but there is a weak front across northern parts of Scotland, and here it is a bit fresher than elsewhere. But as we go through the night, do watch out for some hefty showers pushing into southern parts of England. Some of these could have the odd bit of thunder mixed in as well, and there may be be a few pockets of mist and fog, but across southern parts it's really going to be a warm and sticky night. Temperatures really holding up. A much fresher story further north. In fact, in some of the rural spots, the sheltered glens of Scotland, we could fall as low as 4 or 5 Celsius. So a bit of a fresher, chilly start across Scotland first thing, and that front I mentioned earlier bringing some outbreaks of rain to the Northern Isles. Otherwise, it's a dry, bright and sunny story for many. A bit more cloud perhaps across parts of Northern Ireland and some parts of Northern England. A bit of a grey start here, but elsewhere across much of England and Wales, any mist and fog patches that do develop overnight will quickly be burnt away by the sun, and there will be plenty of sunshine and plenty of blue skies. That being said, we are expecting a few more showers to develop as we go into the afternoon, particularly across southern, southeastern parts, and these showers could be fairly intense. Some heavy downpours, some frequent lightning, some thunder and hail, all could lead to some issues. The temperatures are still going to be on the high side, just about getting into the low 30s across the south. Fresher than this, though, further north, similar to today. High teens, low 20s, so feeling warm enough in any sunshine. Into Thursday, and the heavy thunderstorms are going to be a bit more widespread. Across much of England and Wales, there is the risk.
Celebrate a spectacular summer with your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash in our Great British Giveaway. It's the biggest prize of the year so far, and it's totally tax-free. What would you spend that on? Luxury holidays, a new car, or just put it away for a rainy day? Whatever you do with £30,000 in tax-free cash, make sure you don't miss out on a chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Stefan Kyriazis has, as always, been in theatres. He's here to tell us of his experiences. Hello, Stefan, or should I say, hello, Dolly.
Well, hello, Michael.